you're gonna get free this time. Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Or as we would say, hola, hola, hola. Great to be here with you. This is Deb Air, and you are listening to You, Me, and the Elephant. Welcome back. I'm saying that to you. And for me, it's been over a month since I've recorded an episode. And I've said this before when I do solo episodes, Crystal is certainly with me and with you. Speaking of that, coming to the end of the year, Crystal and I both want to thank each and every one of you for listening. It's been really incredible to listen to the ways in which you all are being touched or supported by this podcast, and hearing you listening to an episode, thinking about a friend and going, oh my gosh, and sending it off to them. So it's really great to know that it's being shared and that's touching you. And there's this wonderful human being, and his name is Preston Smiles. He's a transformational coach, life being, love human. And I've heard him say a few times that the fruit doesn't belong to the tree, it belongs to the ecosystem. And I'm bringing that forward as a way to really thank you all. And also in my own receivership of this podcast. And like, even though I'm one of the trees that's like bearing this fruit called You, Me, and the Elephant, it doesn't belong to me. And I'm simultaneously right alongside of you, part of the ecosystem. And that's the beauty. It's a very different experience than saying, gosh, I have to, because this has also been coming up for me, like I have to provide. I'm really have been sitting with lately how deeply that goes in regard to my desire to serve, but serve in a way that is of some high standard that I don't know that I could ever reach. And it's so ingrained in there. So it becomes like a gremlin, right, that you don't see. So all that to say that the fruit is for you, the fruit is for everybody. And our desire for this coming year is that You, Me, and the Elephant is heard by so many more of you, and that it continues to blossom and thrive and feed the ecosystem. So thank you for this beginning year. And we are hoping to enjoy so many more. So I just got back from Costa Rica after being there for about a month. And as per usual, there's just so many beautiful things I could talk about and ahas I had. And also, in the ways that I notice, is that I could be somewhere on the planet, someone else could be over here on the planet, and even another person far away. And there are always common threads of humanity between us. And as this, in fact, as You, Me, and the Elephant continues, that's one of the things that gets clearer and clearer are those invisible threads that do connect us all. And this is where we do it. We sit in the space, we allow for our identities to kind of loosen a grip a little bit, to consider, to ask the question. It's my belief that when we ask the question, we're entering into the gap space that allows whatever the amount of energy you need, the wisdom, any timeline you need to access, it's all there for you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Costa Rica, but first I'm going to start with a question, because I want to enter into the door, enter the gap space with you. And the question is this: what do you do when you get what you want? Just felt like that needed a pause. What do you do when you get what you want? Oh, so, coming back from Costa Rica, seeing many of my clients and my family and friends, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it must have been amazing. You've wanted to do this thing." And I'll tell you in a moment what I was doing there. "You want to do this thing for so long and you did it. Like you accomplished it. It must have been a blast and you were on the ocean and it was amazing." So I was met with everyone else's excitement, and it was all very positive. And what was interesting is when I interfaced with that, it was like, yes, I am really grateful, but there was something missing, meaning that I had experiences while I was in Costa Rica that didn't quite match that excitement. So this has really brought me to, well, what do you do when you get what you want? And what is the common thread of how we're taught to like perform and get things done and accomplish things? We talk about that a lot, right? And what do we do to get there? And what do we do after? So, as we know, we are all very conditioned. We are a culture of goals. We are very forward thinking. And I think because of that, we often connect like our worthiness to accomplishing goals. And in order to really, I think it's, we measure our self-worthiness between how well we can do and perform, right? How we can get it done, quote unquote, it done. And that's sometimes the challenge when we're just in that arena, subconsciously, especially when we're so conditioned to be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I feel good. I don't know if anybody's ever sat on the couch and they have like lists going on in their mind, and you may be even zoning out watching a show, but in the background the battery is being drained. Your life battery is being drained because there's these lists and lists and lists. And those lists, I believe, come from the conditioning that you only deserve to get to be doing this thing, watching a show, relaxing on the couch, whatever it may be, as long as you're doing something, as long as the next step is going to be accomplishing that thing. I've also found, like, if I was doing this the other day, I was closing my eyes and I was playing with this, and I was reaching my arm out, imagining like just goals and thinking of certain goals that I have, and like stretching my arm out and imagining like I got there and I reach it. And what was interesting is I got this feeling as soon as I reached it, there was like another goal right in front of that one. And then there was another goal right in front of that one, kind of like those mirrors when you, those like circus mirrors, and you look through them and you see all like the dimensionality of you, and you see like 100 yous. That's what I felt with goals. And it felt kind of exhausting when I did that. I was like, oh my God, like it's, goals are great and have a value, right? They give you a point A to start with. There's a desire somewhere in there. And so here's where I am now. Here's where I want to be. A goal is the bridge. A goal says, here's what's happening. This is where you want to go. And I say it's the bridge, but it's really almost like the end point, right? We don't, there's many different ways in which, and we're not going to talk about goals all episode here. I'm just really talking about how that common thread between us all, that links our self-worth with performance, and that the goal is the way to perform. It gives you the container to perform in. I mean, we all have goals that we've created for ourselves that we've accomplished, and we all have goals that we have not accomplished. And it's a very interesting thing. It's confusing in a way that we are valued for what we can accomplish. But yet, when we accomplish things, we're not fantastic at celebrating ourselves. We certainly have occasions. You graduate, you have a graduation, you have a birthday, you're celebrated, you accomplish something, you get a raise, you're celebrated. When I graduated from chiropractic school, there were parties, right, that I went to. But this is my next revelation, and it's not a new revelation. In fact, we have a whole episode on celebrating. And I really recommend, if you haven't listened to it, to check it out, because I think it is a huge factor. And when I graduated chiropractic school, I wasn't trying to get good grades per se. What I was very devoted to on a soul level was that I knew this was such a draw to become a chiropractor. I knew this was a part of my soul path. And people who loved me even tried to deter me away from that in a way of protection. You know how we can do that with people, like people's fears go, oh, I don't know if you want to do that. You're going to owe too much money, or you're going to, whatever their stories are. And we'll get to that in a moment, that stories and how things have imprinted us absolutely influence what we do or even the goals that we make. So this was a real soul goal of mine. And the one thing that I knew was important to me is if I was going to spend this much money, I was going to eat up everything. I was going to take it like eat up the fruit, right? I was the ecosystem. I was like, yes, I'm going to just take it all in. And it turned out that I ended up being the valedictorian. And that in itself, it's like, hell yeah, Deb. I did not feel that at the time. In fact, I was so shocked. And there was this woman who really wanted to be the valedictorian, and she was so close to my GPA that I invited her to co-valedictorian with me. That's not really part of this story. Maybe in a way it was, because it was my sneaky way of not just saying, way to go, Deb. And even though we had parties, it was like once that was over, I already had the 10 goals in the hopper. Now it's like I had the job already set up. It's now I'm taking care of practice members, or patients, I used to call them back then. And I'm now thinking, like, when do I open a business? Where do I open a business? I'm already so far in advance. And not until many, many years later, I've been a chiropractor now for 30 years. And not until probably at least 20 years later did I reflect one time in having a conversation with a family member that I never really celebrated. I never said, oh my God, like I did that. And so it's very sneaky. Now that's a bigger goal, right? But in truth, our checklists are really mini goals. We have daily goals, we have big life goals. Like that was one of them, to go to chiropractic school. And really, that was a goal along the way, knowing that I wanted to be a chiropractor. And we have yearly goals, personal goals, physical goals, spiritual goals. So they come in all different ways. The one thing I'm pretty certain is that everyone at some point has had a list, and some of us are big listers. Like I could look every time I clean out my papers, I'm like, oh my God, there's like a zillion lists. It never freaking ends. And I say that way, I think, because where I'm headed in my reflection today is, it's like goals. We are so conditioned to goal that at least for me, and I've seen this with others, that there's so many goals always in the hopper that it's very easy not to celebrate. It's very easy not to actually pause in the space between the goals. And this is just one part. So my temptation is, how in this, like even coming week, and how can you maybe even make 2024 a time where you're like, this is the year of celebrating between every freaking goal. Like demonstratively, that's what we talk about in the episode of celebration. Can you move your body? Can you breathe in your body? And can you make sound? Can you touch your body in ways that bring energy not only to the identity of the person, that the version that created the goal, but that also celebrates parts that you don't even realize are really dying to be celebrated by you. So if you're someone like me, it's really easy to celebrate life. It's really easy for me to put a silver lining on, I really do feel gratitude. I really, really do. And sometimes it comes in and just floods me, and the tears come and it's just overwhelming. Sometimes it's really hard to feel gratitude. And I'm like, I'm thinking gratitude. I know it exists. It's like the sun behind the cloud on a rainy day. Like, it exists, but you just can't see it. And, but and I'm good at really celebrating other people, but it's a little bit trickier when you're looking in the mirror and you're like, way to go, Deb. Like, wow, you're freaking amazing. And I think that we all have plenty of space to get real in ways that allow us to see some of the harder parts, which we're going to get to today, actually. And it's a big and. I think it's so important to look in the mirror and being like, you did that. You did that. So the first invitation is, can you make 2024 a practice of celebrating, the littlest daily moment to a life goal that you accomplished, to something you experienced? Can you act like you just won the lottery? Can you allow your body to feel your gratitude by your celebration, which I think we get an access to the energy of source when we celebrate. And it doesn't, even if we're not feeling celebratory, and I think that's an important part of this conversation today, is why when I came back and everybody was, this is great, oh, you must have had a great time and it must have been amazing, was it amazing? And my older self, an older version of myself, a younger self, but an older version of myself would have said, yeah, it was great. So great. I'm so grateful. It was so great. And that's the time where you like talk gratitude, but you don't mean it because there's some other experience that you had, like I said earlier, that doesn't quite match that. So when someone has this like really ecstatic moment and is like, it must have been great. And you're like, it was totally right. Sometimes I have felt like, how do I even express this, even to myself, where it's like, I should be celebratory, but why don't I feel completely celebratory? I believe that the version of person that set the goal is not the same version of person that accomplishes the goal. I believe that our culture hugely values the performance and the accomplishing, but we really kind of turn a blind eye to the who we are in the middle space, in the space between the person who set the goal and the person who accomplished the goal. And because of that, we may celebrate a little bit, but why I think we don't really celebrate in totality. Some of us, even if you tend to celebrate yourself, which I think in general we kind of suck at, honestly, I think because we don't value who we are between, in the space between the setting and the accomplishing, that we miss a lot of parts of ourselves. We miss a lot of acknowledgement of all these versions of ourselves, not only between the setting of the goal and accomplishing it, but who even had to be who she was or who he was or who they were to even get to the point of setting that goal. So that's one thing. And I'm going to share my story here in a moment because I'm going to give you an example of how it felt for me. And I want you to keep yourself in the circle of consideration of where are those times that you have accomplished even a bigger moment in your life. And it felt somewhat confusing because what you thought you were going to feel or assumed you were going to feel maybe doesn't match completely what you actually felt when you accomplished that. So I went to Costa Rica because many of you, and I've said this on here before, I am a lover of Spanish culture. Since I was in high school, I really loved the Spanish language where all my friends were taking French. I was like, I want to learn Spanish. So it's something that was just in me, that was very organic. When I was in college, I also took Spanish. Then I lived on the border of Mexico for several years. So I was very immersed in Spanish culture. And then I moved to the East Coast where I'm much less immersed in the Spanish culture. But again, the soul has a way. The soul has a way to guide us, doesn't it? The mind sometimes or often can be so confused at what the freaking soul is doing. It's like, why am I here? I thought I knew why I was here, and I've shared many different stories where the soul just goes, "Hang on a moment, just wait, just hang in there." And it's really talking to our mental state of affairs, consciousness, and saying, "Just hang in there, like trust me." Soul is all about like it beckons you to have trust. So, in the way that soul works, I not only have visited Latin cultures, but about probably 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, I went to Costa Rica for the first time. And let's just say it was a very powerful resonance, and it has become more and more a part of my life. I now steward land there where we rent cabins, and it's just a really important place for me. And so, for whatever reason, this is where soul's like, this is where you're going to your next evolution of this Spanish love that you have of language, of culture. So, as things developed, I came to a point like 2.5 years ago. I was like, I need a teacher. I am not practicing Spanish. I am in so much pain when I go there and I'm talking to my neighbors and I have to drop out of the conversation in 4 minutes because I'm just too confused. And I'd beat myself up and I'd be frustrated. But really, underneath all that was that I just wanted to be connected to the community. If I was to be part of that community, I wanted to feel like I could communicate. And this is going to go into something I'm going to talk about in a moment with, I talked about Preston Smiles in the beginning, but I'm going to also share his 4 aspects of being human being. But the point is it was heartbreaking. And so I got a teacher and I got to this point and it was great. It was a stretch. It was wonderful. And people kind of said that about that too. Like, oh, how's your Spanish going? I was like, well, I feel like it's hard. So I got to this point about a year ago where I was like, or at the beginning of 2023, where I was like, I feel like it's time for an immersion. I feel like I need to go to a school where all I'm hearing is Spanish and I'm taking away something that I'm used to, that I take for granted, which is knowing how to communicate through my voice, through the spoken language. And I'm going to take that away and I'm going to jump into another spoken language. And I did that. And I'm going to say right here with all of you, I am celebrating that. I am celebrating that. I just did a dance for some of my sisters. I'm in a women's group and we Marco Polo all the time. And I was so grateful to have this reflection by one of my sisters. And she said, I want to see a Deb celebration, that this is something you've been wanting. This was the next phase of this desire, this dream, this soul desire. And you did it. I want to see you celebrate. And so I took all of my books and I took my graduation certificate and I moved my body and I celebrated and it felt amazing. And to go back to that for a moment, I find that when I do that, when I use my biology as not just my brainology, when I use my body in a way that wakes up the cells, it will touch the physical part of me. It will touch the emotional part of me. It'll touch the mental part of me. It'll touch the soul and heart part of me. It'll touch something greater, the soul, the source, the God of whatever spirit you connect with. And you don't have to say anything. You just let your body do the magic, because we really are stardust. I was really grateful for that. So to come back to Costa Rica, I go to Costa Rica, I'm doing the thing. And funny enough, I haven't met with my teacher in 6 months just because of scheduling. So I'm kind of going into school cold turkey. And the thing about this school, I highly recommend it, by the way, if anybody wants to learn Spanish, is that you cannot speak English. And ultimately, I think that's a great thing. But it certainly felt like a fire hose coming at me. It was like, wow. And there's something about when we are, like when you're a caterpillar in a chrysalis, when we are reaching a goal, we are saying, I'm going to stretch, I'm choosing to grow, because you would already have reached that goal if you we're already at that version, meaning it wouldn't be a goal because you would already be being that person that is a person that has the thing, does the thing, whatever the goal is. So anytime you set a goal, there's going to be a growth aspect. So like the caterpillar in the chrysalis that's going to become the butterfly, that caterpillar in that chrysalis struggles. And this is the other part. First is the celebration part, right? Second is beginning to notice that there's an in-between phase between the person who sets it and the person who's already accomplished it. Paying attention to this, the who you're being in between, the life cycle of this goal. And the third thing is that with accomplishing a goal, there is going to be struggle in some way. There's going to be like that caterpillar has to struggle. And if you didn't let that caterpillar struggle, what it's doing when it's struggling in there is it's pushing the fluid in the butterfly wings. And that fluid allows the butterfly to fly. Generally speaking, we're like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to celebrate that I did that. I kicked ass. Yes, that's awesome. And again, some of us are good at that. Some of us suck at that. But even when we're good at that, are there other places that you're not truly celebrating? And is it because what I'm speaking to now is that we're not really valuing that when we're actually in the between space, when we're doing the thing, like I was going to school, like I accomplished my goal once I graduated. But what was the experience in Deb in Spanish school? Do we ever stop and think that and go, oh my goodness, like what happens when I'm in the chrysalis? Because you're always going to be in the chrysalis to some degree, even from a daily goal, but it could be bigger ones when they're a life goal and so on. So it wasn't always easy. I went in there as a 56-year-old woman who's used to speaking, who's used to communicating, using my linguistic part of who I am, and that just gets taken right away. And I'm also now in a culture, not just linguistically speaking, but I'm in a culture, a social culture that's completely different. Now I'm somewhat familiar with that, which helped, but I take it all away and I'm now a student. When was the last time I was a student? Now, I'm always a life student, but I'm talking like classroom, homework, tests, all those things. So a lot came up for me, a lot in the way, even unconsciously, who, like, what kind of student am I? And I've always been one of those students that's like one of the last people to take the test. I reread my questions and I have, discovered that I have a high value on doing well. And it's very sneaky because sort of like I was the valedictorian, I wasn't trying to be the valedictorian. When I started working at these international retreats, I wasn't trying to do that, but it was who I was being that was driving me. And so for whatever reason, that tends to be how it works for me. That being said, behind all that is my desire to do really well. So bottom line is going to school, there was amazing moments. There were funny moments because I have learned, I knew it was going to be hard, but again, I could only know what I knew from who I was. Now I had to actually embody and experience it. So extremely humbling, extremely hard at times, extremely frustrating at times, extremely fun at times, extremely expanding at times, having so much gratitude. And I want to say it was probably in the third week. I remember I would walk everywhere. I could walk from my Airbnb to the school. I just literally felt like a little kid in school, just being like, I want to go home. So I had a lot of struggles in my chrysalis of that space between before I accomplished the thing. And I think what I've been noticing is that we're not really conditioned to value the range of what we experience as part of the success, if you will, of the experience. And this can even happen, you hear a lot of pro athletes say they win the big World Cup, or they win the World Series, or they win the Olympic medal, or whatever it is. And it's all this celebration, right? But then there's this, like, you'll hear a lot of athletes say, yeah, I felt like depressed after, or sad, or let down, or I felt stressed, because it's like, how can I ever accomplish something so big? Or I felt stressed that I have to keep getting better. And I wonder, have any of you felt that need? And it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of this conversation, that, like, when I put my hand out for that goal, there was the circus mirror that kept going and kept going and kept going, because there's a conditioning that we all share to some degree that says, in order to be worthy, you must continue to accomplish. And those of us that have strived high and we accomplish stuff, it can be hard to go, well, what else? Or we're just tired. I just did a workshop on what's called the sacred art of desire. And what we did is we pulled apart desires and goals. And I find that sometimes, and one of the questions you may want to gift yourself is look at some of your goals and ask yourself, is this my goal? Or is this my conditioning? There's a sacred art to desiring. And I think that when we desire, it opens up a connection to soul. And our soul, I feel like, if before we became a body, if you imagine your soul is in this constellation form, and it has a whole map to it, right? It has a whole shape and map. And it's like, okay, and it's waiting for the perfect time that's going to create the perfect life that allows that soul to unlock the soul map as you go through life. This is my belief, anyways. And you come down, and your soul's job is to wake up and illuminate that map as you go. I believe the link to doing that is the art of desiring, because when we desire, it's not about accomplishing anything. When we desire, we open up a soul longing. And that soul longing is like a soul flashlight that allows you to see a broader and broader landscape of who you are, of who you've always been before you were in this body. And I think the longing helps direct the compass to what that next awareness of your soul's waking up, that map, that space of who you are. I think it wakes that next version up for you. We're a culture that's very conditioned to goal, to create goals, because in order to feel worthy, we must perform, and the goal creates the structure for that to happen. We are less conditioned or taught ever on how to desire. And in fact, a lot of times, if we're longing or we're desiring, it can be judged as being needy, as not being grateful. And this is why I'm dropping all these little hints, because it can be very tricky and very confusing. You can be grateful and you can long. You can be frustrated and you can long. You can be all of the ranges, because the longing wakes up the soul map. And I believe the tools to be able to wake up the soul in this human body are all of the experiences of our humanity. So that means our gratitude. That means our celebration. That means our frustration. That means our confusion. That means our fear. That means all of it. They're all parts of our human expression. And if they're not valued enough, and we don't give ourselves permission to desire, I believe a lot of times our goals become very automatic. They become very cultural based, and we start being like this workhorse for something else. It can be really easy to lose sight of ourselves in that whole process. I believe that desires don't have a beginning and the end. It just continues to lighten up the map. And desires have no rules, they have no beginning and no end. So it is a place, it is a playground for the soul. And as we've heard, you better be careful what you ask for because you may just get it. I think that really does come from the aspect of I believe that statement is trying to have us value that we're going to feel growth pains when we're becoming the thing that reaches the goal, when we're becoming the person that's reaching the goal, the place we are in between accomplishing it. And I certainly felt that way. And to go back to that place when people are like, it must have been amazing. It must have been great. It's like, yes. And it was, let me tell you what great was. Great was fucking hard sometimes. And I wanted to go home and I couldn't wait to just go in my Airbnb when it was beautiful and sunny out. And I just wanted to curl in a ball because I felt so worthless and I felt like I didn't know anything. And I, at a point, felt like I couldn't speak English and I couldn't speak Spanish. So I'm like, if I can't accomplish this, then I'm freaking unworthy. And I'm someone who has embodied many different ways on how to access my worthiness. And I desire almost every day. I write down my desires. I embody my desires. I want to say it doesn't matter. It matters that I do that. It's what actually got me to create a goal that was congruent. And this goes back to, is your goal yours? When we can desire more and we start waking up that soul map, then we create the goals that are in alignment with those desires. And now that has energy to it. It has an alignment of who you are. And it becomes more, it has a greater percentage of being able to become a reality. And the other reality is that you're always going to have a growth edge. So my invitation to myself has been, and it is, I'm also extending that to you, is can you increase the range of what you value in your experience of who you're being as you're accomplishing your goal? Expect a shadow self to come up, or expect to feel a moment of struggle, a moment of fear, a moment of, because if you were already that version of yourself, you wouldn't have the goal in the first place. So expect it. Can we value that and can we celebrate? And that's what I started doing when people were asking me. I was like, oh, yeah, it was amazing and it was stretchy. I kept saying it was really stretchy as if it was a shock to me. And in a way, part of it was. And I am learning that celebrating is celebrating the totality of my human nature. And the other aspect of the celebration in increasing the value, knowing that in between place of the goals, of the setting and the accomplishing, it's going to be the crux, the range, to celebrate the hell out of the parts that are like, yes, and to celebrate like, oh my God, I'm stretching. That means I am actually getting that much closer to accomplishing my goal. Can you celebrate the stretchy, uncomfortable parts? The other part that I was mentioning, Preston Smiles, he talks about the 4 aspects of being a human being. The first one is we are biological beings. And I believe all of the aspects of our human being can be funneled through our biological being. But we are biological beings in order to, let's say, move forward and create and accomplish goals. I have this body, I have my breath, my heart is beating. And again, doesn't mean that it's not hurting along the way, right? Or I could walk forward and do this thing. So, can you celebrate the parts of your body that you've been asking to work for you? Whether it was a physical goal you had, can you thank that body a year ago when you set that goal, or even the person that was before then. When I accomplished graduating from chiropractic school, since I use that example, did I ever thank the little girl in me that always felt like I was supposed to help this world and that there was a reason why people came to me and that I was a safe space? Did I celebrate that little girl? I don't think I did. Did I celebrate that teenager that was an athlete that would really love like the physical therapists and different healers coming in and helping and supporting my teams that I was on? Did I thank her and her perseverance and her enamorment and how it felt to watch these practitioners take care of and support us? I don't think I did. Did I thank that college student that got excited and said, you know what, I'm going to start going to a chiropractor I'd never been, and I am going to work for a chiropractor, and I'm just going to feel this and be with this, and the courage that I had? I don't think I did. And I think there's a lot of ways that we don't acknowledge. And this is the second part I wanted to say of Preston's four aspects of a human being, is that we're also social and historical beings. And that means that we come in and we have the epigenetics of what our ancestors have been able to express thus far. Bam, it lands in our nervous system, it lands in our DNA. And I think most of us know at this point that DNA is not solid in the way that there's many different ways that you can influence what DNA gets expressed. That's called epigenetics. But we have, and part of epigenetics is that we are influenced from the moment before we arrived through our ancestors and the moment we arrive, imprints from our parents, the culture, our teachers, our friends, our community. And a lot of our goal setting is going to be based on all of these imprints that we begin to adhere to, belief systems. So when I'm in the celebration, I'm now acknowledging the body. And that's why I was saying earlier, like, move your body, sound your body, breathe your body, touch your body. And can you look back and look at different versions of you? And can you celebrate and thank those versions of you? Because those versions were the necessary versions of precursors that brought you to that moment of success, that brought you to that moment of accomplishment. Another aspect of human being Preston talks about is that we are linguistical beings. And this was literally something that I did. I took away what I was used to, and which linguistically is how we communicate. Even if we're not speaking, whether we're using sign language, language, verbal language is how we mostly communicate, right? And we've talked about, I think in our sound episode, how it's not just the structure of words we use, it's the tone in which we use them. I mean, I was really schooled on that with one of the things that I have had a habit of saying, I think from my experience in Italy, that doesn't really translate in Costa Rica. It was really great because my teacher said, you know, Deborah, you do this thing linguistically, meaning you say this thing, and I know that you're not meaning it in this way, because basically she could hear the tone and she could feel the energy. So linguistics, my point is that that's how we connect. That's how, like, you have a doorknob to open a door. Like, you need these things to connect life. And so when you are in that celebration of who are you being and how are you connecting with life differently. So for me, quite literally taking my normal spoken language away gave me so much gratitude that I actually have a spoken language that I'm fluent in, that I absolutely take for granted. I also have spent a lot of time valuing what is the energy that goes into words. And I think that is across the board. That can also come out in body language as well. So, can you look at the ways in which you are using communication? And can you thank that linguistical self that has taken the time to learn how to communicate, to, let's say, get better at learning to communicate more deeply with somebody when you're charged or you're triggered, or that you're using in more transparent conversations? Can you thank that version that got you to that point? And the last version, so there's the biological being, there's a linguistical being, there's the social and historical being, and fourthly, there's the quantum being. Can you thank the soul, which goes back to the desires, right? The soul map. Can you thank the soul in you that was there all along, nudging you, pushing you, like tapping you, and just holding you in the trust of this is the direction? Even if you can't see it with your mind, can you trust it? So there were a lot of achy breaky parts to my trip, and there were a lot of amazing parts, which I celebrate each and every one of them. And I am hoping that there are parts in here of this conversation with me today that you got to just pause a moment in the space between, taking a moment to say, where can you even retrospectively celebrate the freak out of yourself? Like jump up and down. When I just Marco Poloed my friends that I said asked to celebrate, I took my Spanish books and I was dancing and I was saying yes and I was moving my body, and it felt amazing. And it felt amazing to be witnessed, which I think goes into the linguistical part. Can you celebrate with somebody else? We're a world that says, oh, I don't want to brag, or oh gosh, I don't want to say that because I don't want to make that person feel bad. I think it's time to brag. I think it's time to celebrate. You can retrospectively brag, retrospectively celebrate. And can you make 2024 a year that reflects on the biological part of you, the linguistical part of you, the social and historical part of you, the quantum part of you, that can retrospectively thank all the versions of who you were when you set your goal, who you were becoming as you were experiencing the goal? Because there's always going to be a gap between what you think you're going to feel when you accomplish it and what you're actually feeling. It requires to stretch the lens of what you celebrate and what experiences you have as you crystallize and as you push the fluid into your wings. I'm celebrating all of you and all of your accomplishments, but even more who you're being in the space between, as you're becoming those parts of you that are the soul tapping, the soul essence of who you are becoming at any given moment. Thank you so much for being here. May you celebrate the moments. May you sit in the space between the goals, and may you increase the range of what you call success and when you are feeling your growth. So much love and appreciation to all of you. Hasta luego. Until next time. Or, as we would say in Spanish, hasta la próxima vez. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.